The concept of immortality is one that mankind has pondered for centuries. The Encyclopedia Britannica says that immortality is the continued existence of either the mental, spiritual, or physical existence of certain individuals. Philosophers, such as the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, believed that the body and the soul were separate entities. The body was mortal, but the soul was immortal. For many, immortality is the continued existence of the physical. Your body won't age, and you'll walk the earth for centuries. And there are people who some say have achieved that very thing. One such person being the Comte de St Germain or the Count St Germain. What makes the man known as Count St Germain so interesting is that we know some of what he did and we know that he lived. But beyond that, he is a mystery. Like I said, we do know that the Count did exist, as there are records from the 18th century that confirm his existence. What we can piece together is this. Count St Germain seemed to have arrived on the scene in Europe sometime in the mid-18th century. Whenever he showed up, he appeared as a man in his mid-40s and didn't seem to ever age. He would show up in seemingly random places in Europe. He was a skilled musician, a talented painter, charming and quick-witted. He spoke many languages fluently, including French, German, Dutch, Spanish, Swedish, Portuguese, Russian, and English. He was also said to have knowledge of Sanskrit, Chinese, and Arabic. He claimed to be a son of the Prince of Transylvania, Francis II Rákóczi, a claim that isn't verified in any way but would account for his wealth and his education. The Prince of Transylvania would leave a will that mentioned his eldest son, who was believed to have died at the age of 4. But those who believe that the Count could be his son started speculating that maybe the Count's real identity was safeguarded as a protective measure from the persecutions against the Habsburg dynasty. In 1779, St. Germain would tell Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel that he was 88 years old. If he was 88 in 1779, he would have been born in 1691 when his father was 15 years old. But like I said, he traveled all over and showed up in different places at different times. For instance, from 1737 to 1742, he was supposedly in Persia studying alchemy, and he would become very accomplished in the art of alchemy. He claimed that he was able to turn base metals such as lead into pure silver and gold, and he was believed by many to have discovered the secret of immortality, and that he had created an elixir that would impart immortality on those who drank it. Further adding to these rumors is the fact that St. Germain was never seen eating anything, but he was often seen drinking. Regardless, wherever he traveled, he always set up an elaborate laboratory, most likely for his alchemy work. In 1745, according to some reports, he had traveled to England. And while he was there, he started impressing people with his music. And he's even said to have contributed some of the songs to La Inconstancia de Lucia, which was an opera performed at the Haymarket Theatre in London from February to April 1745. Despite his outlandish tales, or perhaps because of them, he would arouse suspicion in London and ended up being arrested on suspicion of espionage. At the time, there was an active uprising going on in Britain with the Jacobite Rising of 1745. He would be released shortly after he was arrested, though. The Count is also said to have given 2 private musical performances in London in April and May 1749. Reportedly, he was a great musician, and some said that he would have been famous if it wasn't for his status. He would be described as very well dressed and pale with black hair and a beard. Where the Count went after he was in London is unclear, but he would appear in the French court sometime later. In 1749, he would be employed by Louis XV for diplomatic missions. During this time, he would be impersonated by a mime who told even wilder stories than he did, such as him having advised Jesus. And this adds to the Count's mystery because this mime and his stories would get mixed up with the tales that the Count would tell. But like I said, we do know that the Count existed. For instance, he would have dinner with another famed individual, Casanova, in Paris 1757. Casanova would describe a dinner that he had attended where the Count was also present. According to Casanova, the Count was unequaled as a conversationalist. In fact, he could talk from the beginning of the meal to the end of the meal, and he did not eat anything. In fact, Casanova would write that he wouldn't eat anything either because he felt it was polite to give the Count his full attention. The Count seemed to want to impress or amaze those who listened to his stories. So he would casually tell people that he was 300 years old, that he knew the secret of universal medicine, that he possessed a mastery over nature, or that he could melt diamonds. Casanova writes that he did not believe a single word of what the Count was saying, but he did acknowledge that the Count was an astonishing man. Though it should be pointed out that while the Count seemed to be able to move around various countries and charm many important people, there were those who viewed him with skepticism. For instance, he is a man who never dies and who knows everything, is how Voltaire supposedly described him. And it's theorized that this was most likely a sarcastic remark, as some historians will say that Voltaire was very skeptical of the Count. And we know from Casanova that he was as well. Even though he had a dinner with Casanova in France in 1757, he had also been traveling to other places, such as in 1755 he supposedly went to India. During his time in Amsterdam in March 1760, he tried to open peace negotiations between Britain and France, but these would fail, and it almost led to the Count being arrested. Before that could happen, though, St. Germain would travel to England under an assumed name. On the 27th of February 1784, Count St. Germain allegedly died while staying in an abandoned factory in Eckernford. His death was recorded in the register of the local church, and he would be buried on March 2nd. This means that the official burial site for Count St. Germain is at St. Nikolai Church in Eckernford. But his story doesn't end here. In fact, the story of Count St. Germain somehow gets even weirder. Like I said, the story of the Count is interesting all on its own, with him claiming to have traveled all over, and the vast knowledge that he seemed to have, and his appearances at various parties and royal courts, and the fact that he seemed to meet very famous and influential people. Despite telling really outlandish stories, the Count seemed to enjoy being as mysterious as he possibly could. And of course, that would cause people to wonder about him, and rumors would start to spread, and the Count would enjoy these even more. The Count was able to charm people with his good looks and his class, but he was also very skilled and very intelligent. According to reports, St. Germain was very accomplished in many things, but the one thing that garnered the most attention for him was his alchemical work, and of course, rumors of the occult. And if you add to that his own strange comments about his age and the reports that he didn't seem to age, people soon began wondering if Count St. Germain had somehow found the secret to immortality. And of course, that led to more stories. One story regarding the Count's immortality goes like this. In Paris, 1760, a Countess von Georgi had heard that a man going by the name of Count St Germain had arrived for a soirée at the home of Madame de Pompadour, who was the mistress of King Louis XV of France. The Countess had met Count St Germain before, when she was in Venice in 1710. So hearing about the Count arriving at this soirée, she got curious. And when she found herself face to face with him again, she was astonished, because the man in front of her looked exactly like the man she met 50 years ago. She asked him if the man that she knew in Venice could have been Saint Germain's father. The Count would smile and say no. He then went on to say that he had been living in Venice at the time. The Countess then exclaimed that that would be impossible, as the Count that she knew was around 45 years old, and the man that she was now talking to looked the same age. The Count would then smile again, and he simply said, "Madame, I am very old." He then proceeded to tell her details that only the man that she had met and known 50 years earlier would know. And that's just one story that went around about the Count. And of course, this could all just be fantastical gossip to entertain the rich and bored. There would be many reported sightings of the Count throughout the 19th century and well into the 20th century. Some of the sightings were pretty innocuous, while others seemed somehow even more unbelievable. For instance, one alleged sighting took place in 1785, which is a year after he supposedly died, when the Count was seen in Germany with Anton Mesmer. Mesmer was a German physician with an interest in astronomy, and he was working on a theory that he called animal magnetism, also known as mesmerism. And he knew Saint Germain from his stay in Paris. And there are some rumors and reports that say that Saint Germain was the one who assisted Mesmer in developing the theory of mesmerism. And both men are also said to have been at the Paris Convention of the Freemasons in 1785. In fact, some rumors even say that Saint Germain was one of the founders of Freemasonry. And then another sighting of Count St Germain comes from a Countess d'Aumar who had been lady-in-waiting to Queen Marie Antoinette. In the book Souvenirs de Marie Antoinette, there is an entry by the Countess from May 1821 that speaks of a conversation that she had had with Count St Germain, where he had actually warned her about the fate of the Queen. When they parted ways, she would ask him if she would ever see him again. And he would respond that she would see him 5 more times, but she should not wish for a 6th time. The Countess would then write that she did in fact see the Count 5 more times, and despite his warning, she was awaiting the 6th meeting. In the 1970s, French media personality Richard Chanfray would claim that he was Count St Germain, and this claim would make him famous. Like St Germain's outlandish claims, Chanfray also claimed to be capable of transmutating lead into gold, brewing potions, and acquiring immortality. And supposedly he displayed this feat on a Spanish television show. Richard Chanfray would be found dead inside a car on an isolated road in Saint-Tropez in 1983. There's a lot of stories involving the Count, and it can get pretty confusing trying to make sense of it all, because many of his stories would get mixed up with the stories that the mime who impersonated him would tell. There is one story, though, that adds another layer to the Count's supposed immortality. At some point in the early 1900s, a mysterious man would arrive in New Orleans. He claimed that he was from the south of France, and he said that his name was Jaqcue St Germain, and he took residence at the home located on 1039 Royal Street. It wouldn't take long before Jacques had developed a reputation in the city and he became a hit in New Orleans society. He was handsome, charming, mysterious, and appeared to be wealthy. He would often be seen attending parties or strolling around town with a beautiful woman. He also seemed to enjoy throwing dinner parties where he would entertain the guests with fascinating stories of his travels all over the world. And he would speak of events centuries in the past as if he had been there himself. But like Casanova centuries earlier with Count St Germain, many people in New Orleans did not believe a word of these stories, but they'd still enjoy them for their entertainment value. Jacques would claim that he was a direct descendant of Count St Germain. Many people were skeptical of this claim, but they had to admit that there seemed to be a very, very strong resemblance between the two men. And then someone would notice that portraits of Count St Germain never seemed to depict him as older than 45. Which ironically was the same age that Jaqcue St Germain had appeared since he first arrived in New Orleans. So rumors began circulating. Rumors that these two men were not related, instead they were one and the same. And just like Count St Germain, Jaqcue St Germain really seemed to enjoy the rumors and the intrigue that it created. So he neither confirmed nor denied any of the rumors. Instead, he would often play along. As I mentioned, Jacques enjoyed throwing dinner parties, but he never seemed to eat anything. In fact, he would often be seen drinking from a chalice. This strange habit, combined with his uncanny resemblance to the Count, led some in the city to joke around that perhaps Jacques and Count St Germain was a vampire. But these rumors would take a darker turn after police were called to St Germain's home. A woman had fallen from his balcony. She had survived the fall, but she appeared terrified and hysterical. She would tell everyone that she had jumped from the balcony to get away from St Germain. And according to this woman, St Germain had attacked her and bitten her neck. And she was only able to get away when someone had loudly knocked on the door, which distracted St Germain. The woman would be taken to the hospital and the police would then pay a visit to St Germain. But as this woman was rumored to have been a prostitute and St Germain was affluent and respected in the city, the police did not take her claims very seriously. So instead, they politely asked St Germain to visit the police station in the morning so that they could go over the events together. But Jaqcue St Germain never appeared at the police station. In fact, he wasn't seen by anyone in the city ever again. He had seemingly vanished overnight and had left most of his belongings behind. According to some sources, the police would head to St Germain's residence after he had failed to show up at the police station. And according to the legend, when they entered his home, they found a series of corked wine bottles, which were filled with wine mixed with blood. The legend of Jaqcue St Germain as a vampire was now flourishing, with many wondering if there was some truth to the rumors that he and the Count were the same person. And if they were, could it be that he was a vampire? Despite the fact that it can get pretty confusing to try to make sense of all the stories surrounding the Count, what makes him so interesting is that all of these stories almost make him sound like a fictional character. There is so much mystery and speculation surrounding him that it sometimes feels like bad fan fiction. But as I've said before, we do know that he did in fact exist. And we do know that he was a very strange figure, even for everyone who interacted with him. There are those who believe that St Germain was an accomplished alchemist who had discovered the secret of immortality, but there are also those who believe that he may have been a vampire, and that was the cause of his immortality. Either way, he is an intriguing figure from history.